Welcome to Homeschool with BookShark. My name is Jana Cook and I'm the community manager. Today I'm joined with Lynn Woodley, our product expert. We're going to be discussing the literature-based approach of BookShark. And if you are watching this video live, you have any questions or comments, please use the chat box to the side of your screen. If you're watching this as a replay, we'd love to still hear from you. You can email us main@bookshark.com. Hello, Lynn. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So excited to just talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of what BookShark is and our literature-based approach, what it brings to the table of homeschool. So let's just start a little bit with, how about introducing yourself in case somebody who's never met you or knows what you do for our company.
All right, my name is Lynn Woodley and I'm the products expert and charter school liaison with BookShark. And I get out there and see all of our accounts and see all of our families, organize events, go do events, and just answer the questions of product questions that might be a little deeper and people need a little bit more help with that. So got a lot of hats on and juggle that, but I'm just here, just like everybody else, to help our families to be able to move forward in homeschooling in a very positive way. And then also to have the workshops that I used to do in a workshop form in person now on Facebook. So we have a boot camp that Jana and I now lead, and that is just, again, to give support to our families to help them in this journey.
And if this is your first time watching a webinar with us or being with us online, just want to let you know that both Lynn and I are and were homeschool parents that use this program with our children. So sometimes knowing that gives a little bit more validity in what we're saying. We're not here just trying to sell you a product, but we've actually integrated this into our homes and with our own children. And so now we're going to delve into BookShark and its literature-based approach. Lynn, first question, what does that mean?
That's interesting because we get that question a lot. And just to caveat what you were saying a little bit too, I am a retired homeschool mama and did that for several years and have actually been in the homeschool industry now for 20 years, a little over 20 years now. And I just have that passion to help mamas and dads just do this journey in a beautiful way. So, and I chose this because of the literature-based curriculum and how strong our history piece is. And I wanted that strength of history in my child to be much better than mine, because I went to public school. I got history in bites all over the place, and I couldn't put it in or on any hooks and put it or make sense of it or put it in order or any of that. And I wanted to have the strength in history, because when you have that, you have a better sense of what's going on in the world and what's happening. So in this approach, it's a literature-based approach, which means that we teach by great literature. We do have some spines that are a little bit more textbooky, but they're really even still more literature than they are textbook. And so you get approaches from different, or philosophies from different people, different authors, which then gives your children that logical and critical thinking abilities. And that's the beauty of this, that is what it does. So it creates a child who can really think deeply and solidly on many different topics. The one thing that I would like to say is, in that literature piece, we have all those books in there and it all comes together, and it's a natural approach and gives you that natural approach to language that is a beautiful piece. Our piece is really a modified version of classical, Charlotte Mason, and unit study approaches. So if you know anything about those three different types of approaches, we are the modification of those in those three in our piece.
I'd like to believe that we've taken the best of those three things and have put them together in our curriculum.
And from the years that I've done this and the thousands of families that I've talked to, I totally believe that.
Tell our audience a little bit about BookShark's methodology and philosophy.
Our methodology and philosophy is to create a child, to educate a child in a way that they have a whole world thinking, so that they can think and see things and have an opinion themselves on different things. So sometimes you might read a book and disagree with their stand in that book, that's an awesome thing in my point of view, because that gives you and your family and your children the chance to be able to discuss and voice. I don't believe what that book is saying is correct, or their take on history being correct, because here's what I think. And it gives your children that ability to grow their mind and their senses and their empathy and all of that, to be able to be one that thinks, one that isn't just told something and you have to believe it. So you are not only learning a time, a date, and a place or an event, you're learning all the whys and what fors of that event from different perspectives. So it really does open up the mind of your child to be able to creatively, logically think through issues, which I have seen develop in thousands of families and kids. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch.
I would say it also benefits the parent
Mhm.
when you're using this program. And I think there are times where my children would wish that I would stop with the follow-up questions, that my brain would just shut off at the right answer and not go down these bunny trails of, well, what if this and what if that, because at some point they just want to be done with school and go play. But I would say that in doing that with my kids, for my oldest, who I homeschooled with BookShark for 4 years, and then I'm in my 5th year with my youngest, actually 6th. Oh my goodness, with my youngest. And so they now know that's just where I'm going to take it. That's how it's going to go. It's not just the rote, give me the answer and we're done. It's that very natural approach to, okay, now what does that make you think of? And you keep going. It doesn't just end when you close the book.
Right. And I think on that point, there's a variety of different ways that you can take those comprehensive questions from the reading with history portion of it and use it in car rides, use it at the dinner table. It doesn't have to be repeat this question and get the answer. It's a conversation. It's meant to be a conversation. And that's why I recommend that they have a night they put together the week. They read through all those questions. They know those questions in the back of their mind, not exactly how we write them. It's not necessary to say it exactly how we write them. But as you're reading through the book, if it's something that you remember, you can actually stop and have that conversation right there. It's beautiful when the family does a rabbit trail, because you know that they're learning in depth. So if you are one of those families that takes those rabbit trails, take it with joy and see where it takes you, because it's fun to see your children actually wanting to learn more about a situation. So there's so many different ways that you can use that guide and answer those questions and use them in a car ride or on a trip or in a field trip or whatever you want to make of it. It's not just put the question out there, answer it for me, put the question out there, answer it for me. That would be kind of dull and not really there. But like you said, you're moving your family to thinking about more questions. You're going down and you're drilling down, causing them to take that idea and go deeper with it.
I do love for parents or teachers who are maybe not used to this approach in education, that we have an outline for you. If you don't know what questions to ask, we've provided those questions. And if you need to read them word for word, that's okay too. You're teaching yourself a new method, a new way, especially if you were traditionally public schooled as a child and now you're an adult. A lot of people get intimidated with the idea of homeschooling their children because they just think they're not going to know what to do or how to do it. And BookShark has a beautiful guide in each subject. We're only 4 days a week for 36 weeks, completely structured for parents to be able to come in, not having any background in education, and yet provide a quality experience for their children at home.
Right. And over the years in these different workshops that I've had a number of parents who are teachers. That's what their degree is in, their teacher's degree. And over the years, they've always told me it takes 3 to 5 years to create a lesson plan, one lesson plan, one level. As homeschool parents, we don't have 3 to 5 years. When you're working in a year, you're working out of that year, and you don't have 3 to 5 years to plan the next one. So the beauty of BookShark is that we are constantly working on our guides, making them better for you all the time.
And when we're talking about this literature-based approach, what should a parent expect their day to look like when they're using this type of homeschool curriculum?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's actually one that I love covering in our BookShark boot camp every year, because it just helps you to decide how it is. And every year for me, it was a little different. And I would adjust from time to time. So give yourself the grace to be able to adjust even what we talk about here. But it's the day in the life, it's like a 4-day schedule. So it's really nice and easy. And I do the 2010 rule, which I talk about in another a workshop. And that's where you work 20 minutes, you give a 10-minute break. You work 20 minutes, you give a 10-minute break, because families, kids, everybody needs a little break at some time. But you'll read several different types of books. You will do assignments with them. You'll have mapping and timeline information. So there's geography in there, vocabulary. You'll have read alouds, and you'll have readers for the kids to read. Then you have activity sheets. Throughout science, you'll have an experiment once a week. So in the Reading with History, you will get sometimes up to 6 different books that you're reading in the week. And I love that, because it gives the children the ability to stop and start a book and remember what it is. It shows what their memory is like. It shows their ability to capture things, and they can do it. And there's wonderful ways to explain to you how they can do it, but they truly can do that. So we do those readings the way we do them, so that they are left on a cliff. And when you leave somebody on a cliff in a book, what do you want to do? You want to pick that book back up the next day, or as soon as you can, to keep going on to see what the story is. If you go on and read to a valley, are your children as interested in coming back to that book? Maybe, maybe not, but you really do want to leave kids on a cliff. And that's why we set the reading schedules the way we do sometimes. So you want those cliffhangers to be there to drag them back, and actually not drag them back, because they love the books. But in this, you're going to get, from a period of time, you're going to get different perspectives of the history, which is beautiful to see written and brought out, because then you can discuss as a family. So they're learning empathy, logical thinking, critical thinking, the ability to side or not side with a way somebody's writing about something. And even if you don't agree with it, you are going to learn from it. And you'll be interested to see your children even getting their own point of view on a topic or a piece of history. So that's fun to see when the kids are really bringing it all out when they're learning.
I'd like you to go a little bit deeper into what you had said earlier about the hooks. So we talked about how sometimes history can be so segregated, and it's a piece over here, but you don't see how it's connected maybe across the world to something else that's going on. So when you use literature, how does that create a hook?
Okay, so you're creating hooks by talking in the same period. So they're learning about the clothing, they're learning about their eating habits, they're learning about their culture, they're learning about their food intake, they're learning how they interact with all different types and people in society, and maybe even where they lay in that society piece, So as you are learning that, you're able to go, okay, in 1705, this is how they did things. And then you're learning all of that piece. It's joining all together. If I were to teach you, Jana, history, and I'm going to go with, let's go to ancient Egypt. We're going to do that for a couple of weeks. And then we're going to go to Lewis and Clark in the early 1800s. And we're going to talk about them. And we're only going to go to Minnesota where they were. We're not going to go into Montana where they went, or even Oregon where they ended. We're just going to leave it right there. And then next year we come back and we get to Oregon. But we've forgotten the in between, going through Montana and areas. So with that type of learning, you're not going to be able to organize it in there. It's like organizing a paper, a report. If you don't have it in order, it will make absolutely no sense to you or anyone else reading it. You as a writer, you might understand what you're talking about, but if you put it down and read it a year from now, it's not going to make sense. So it's all of those things in order in a time frame that allows you to give your children the hooks to hang that knowledge on, to be able to make sense of all of it.
And I love how when we add a book to a historical fact, you are now reaching your child not only logically with the facts, but now you're reaching them emotionally with a story, with a fictional or nonfiction person, a real life person who had a particular trouble. You have all those points to a great story, but now you're connecting that with the facts of the history. And I think one of the biggest problems that even adults have with history, they find it sometimes dull, is because they're only connecting with one part of their brain, which is the facts, right? Like, just give me the facts. But if you don't have the story that connects the other part of your being, which is your emotions, that connection isn't very strong. And so that's why we don't remember things that are taught to us when we are children. But if you had a story to go along with that,
Right.
I would almost bet that you could then tell the facts about that historical period.
And even a little deeper than that, when we're reading these historical fiction novels to the children, giving them facts of the history pieces, in that story, you're also doing art, because you're reading that book to them. It's going into their brain as a picture. They create their own picture for these stories. And so when they're coloring them in their mind and they're making that video of this story, it is something that is going to imprint on their brain and they will remember. But like you said, if they get, like a textbook, you get a person, place, time, and that's all you really get. You get a little bit of information, but it's not something that you're going to remember. It's just simply not, because like you said, there's no story to it. There's no art to it. There's no color to it. And color is emotion, that really does evoke different emotional feelings. And so that's why those timeline figures are so important, in my opinion, to have them color. So get some good coloring pencils that will actually color well for them and cause that to even embed even deeper.
I would challenge anyone who would question what we're talking about to think of a time when they read a book and then watched a movie that was adapted from that book.
Right.
I'm an avid reader and I love being able to do that, read the book, see the movie. I've never seen a movie that was better than the book. I've never met anybody who has read a book and seen a movie and said, oh no, the movie was so much better. And I think because what you just said, it illustrates the fact that you have created a story, a video in your mind, your perception, how you felt as if you were reading it or being read to. And then when you see somebody else's interpretation of that story, it feels off. It feels wrong.
Right. Right. And that's so amazing how that happens, because you're right. I have never heard of anybody say that the story was as good as the book they read. And that, I do believe, it is that artistic part of that. And the artistic part of that is also, like you said, the emotion part of that, which then develops our whole perception of things and how we can write about those things and how we can even verbalize those things. It's all inside and interwoven in that picture that you have designed in your head, which is extremely beautiful and perfect. There's no flaws in those pictures. Our eyes and our brain can develop gorgeous pictures. Now, it's another thing to take it from here to there on the paper, but even people can train themselves to do that. So it would just evoke even more creativity in that.
Sometimes in this day and age, it is hard for parents to try to communicate that to their children, to try to start this program that, maybe they've not read aloud to their kids before. Maybe they themselves were not read to as children. And so we live in a digital age where you don't even have to wait a week for the cliffhanger to be answered. You can binge watch through your favorite episodes of every season of every show you desire. And so maybe there's this idea of a struggle of, I don't know if I can really get my kids on board with this. I don't even know if I'm on board with this. I think that maybe just speak to that hesitancy because of the day and age that we live in.
Right. So I do like to talk about this part of it because it is so very important. I've had people say, oh, we have sometimes intense pieces in the books, but again, we are age appropriate and you must put your kids in that appropriateness. And if you're having your kids watch TV, I would say that they are seeing far more worse things than they are hearing. But when we hear things, it feels far deeper because we can be emotional with it. So the whole idea of the reading and the read alouds, everybody can do it. You just have to make the decision of what is it you're going to cut out of your lives. And for us, when we were homeschooling, I removed the TV from the home. And so we didn't have a TV to watch, and we weren't bombarded by that possibility of just sitting down and doing that relax. But we were able to read together as a family, and it's fun to see how you blossom with that. Reading aloud is a technique that you need to learn, to put the voices on, to change the voices, the characters. And the thing is, if you're reading aloud and you don't want a concept to be brought to the children, you change the wording or you skip that sentence, and you can do it in a manner that they have no idea or no clue. Like there's never been any cursing in my house, so when it was in the book, we changed the verbiage because we didn't want our children to have the ears that heard that, so there's different things that you can do as well when you're reading aloud. So you get to choose that for your family, but try it. And as the kids get older, you can also use the older kids to do the read alouds, and they can start learning that voice of reading aloud and the different voices you use for the different characters. And that's fun. And the younger kids love to hear that. I still love to be read to. I think that is the most fun thing. And I could lay there and close my eyes and be in my story while I listen to somebody reading to me. I think it's the most beautiful way to share time with a family, because as you do that, you have things to talk about in the car rides, at dinner, with other friends. In fact, we had a couple that we called grandma and grandpa. They weren't, but they were just very dear friends of ours. And they came and stopped by our house. They had their camper, so they camped out back, and then they would come in and we'd have dinner and meals. And they started listening to our read alouds, and they had planned on leaving far sooner than they did, but they wanted to get through the read aloud because they were enjoying it so much. So, and then after we were done, every time after we were done and we would have dinner, we would sit and just talk for hours, everybody, and talk about the book. And then it leads you to different things and different ideas. So I wouldn't call that short. If you don't think your family likes to do that, try it, put it on, give it time, because it becomes one of the most beautiful times in your homeschooling time. And, just snuggling up on the couch together, listening to books or reading books together is just a beautiful family bonding time that we so desperately need in our time, because we need to have that bonding with our families, with our children, with our spouse.
especially as our children age. We did a webinar about why reading aloud to teens is a hidden treasure, why you don't have to stop at a certain age. But I've heard so many times people say, oh, I don't know what to talk with my kids about anymore. They're so out of touch. Like, I don't like technology. It's not something I want to learn. It's not something I want to be immersed in, but my kids love that. Well, it would take a lot for me to start learning that in order to have common ground. But when we read books, there's an immediate common ground that you don't necessarily get mutual enjoyment out of a lot of things in this life
Right.
within different generations. So it is beautiful. I think I can understand why it could be intimidating for people who this
Right.
isn't part of their lifestyle. They've never done it. They didn't grow up doing it. And so we do have some blogs and some help for people to find audiobooks. Lynn, I'd love to share with our viewers what are some of the results that they can expect if they choose to use BookShark and our literature-based approach.
It's interesting because there's a ton of different results, academic, behavior, bonding, all kinds of things. But I'm going to focus first on the academic part of it. When you use our program fully, when you follow the guide, when you ask the questions, do the vocabulary, do all the pieces in it, your children are going to develop into very empathetic, logical, and critical thinkers, which will then in turn give them ability to be in the world in a very adult, positive way. And I think that that is so important in this time and age. Employees need that. The society needs that. So they're children that are going to grow into children that can think and respond with their own input on it. And that, I think, is beautiful. But one of the things that I have seen over the years is when you do use the product the way it's intended to be used, and not just read the books and not do anything else, you do have to do the program to get these results. But kids typically will test at a higher level than any in their peer groups. And that's just a beautiful thing to see how they can gain that. And a lot of that is the vocabulary. It's the books that we read, the depth of thinking that it causes them to do. But as far as everything else, when you're a functioning family that is doing something this positive to your children, you're going to grow a deep bond with your children by reading with them and being with them and having this be a positive experience. And know that you're not here doing it alone. We are completely 110% here behind you. And I've mentioned before the boot camp that we have that Jana and I do. It is a place to ask questions, be a community, know how to use it without having to recreate the wheel. So in that, then you have that support. We start a new group every year, July 1, and the old group gets to go into the alum group, and you still get the support for however long you want it. So we have that building and bonding even with yourselves. And that's one of the things, Janet, that I want to share is it's not only your children that are going to learn and grow, you learn and grow. I don't care what degree you have, you will learn and grow with your children. And it's a wonderful thing to share with your kids. Oh my goodness, I didn't know that. Or if you don't follow or know something, do it with them. Sit beside them and write a research paper if you're like, I don't know exactly how that should go. And then have them grade yours and you grade theirs. That's a fun thing to do as well. And then have them grade their own. So there's a lot of different aspects of results when you use this program, but one of them being growing your family tighter together too.
I would add a definitely lifelong learners.
Yep.
As you're talking about, your children, your child or children are going to learn, but you're going to learn alongside them. And that is demonstrating to them what lifelong learning really is. We don't just get through the 12th grade or get through college and we're done learning. I mean, the beauty of being human is that we constantly get to grow. And so if we are demonstrating growth and learning in adulthood, I think that gets our children a little bit more excited about education beyond just having facts, but
Right.
learning.
Well, the beautiful thing of that too, and I like to go on this as well, is even if you've done your own kids through homeschooling, and you are homeschooling right now, let's say, and you are um, in the midst of this, at some point you might home educate or help somebody else home educate their children. Or perhaps, when your children start having children, you might be in there being the main person teaching them, or you might be the secondary person, but you know how to step in and help also. So this isn't, like you said, just one and done. You are going to continue to learn yourself. And research shows that when you continue and are lifelong learners, that your brain stays healthier through a long, long life.
And I would say probably I would have to find a statistic, but I'm sure it's out there that lifelong learners are more satisfied in life.
Right, right. Because they aren't alone. I mean, even if you are alone, you're not alone, because you're learning, you're gaining, you're finding out new things all the time, and that's expanding your knowledge.
And that's where I think the excitement is, especially in reading books and gaining knowledge, is that you don't have to stay the same, though we can know better and do better. And we can demonstrate that to our kids throughout their
Exactly.
lives.
Exactly. I'm taking a college course right now in beekeeping, because I have a beehive, and I took 180 hours last year, and now I'm starting this new one this year. So it's that continued learning, continued reading, continue expanding your horizons. It doesn't stop. And you want your children to want that. And I believe with this curriculum, you get that result because they're awesome books. I know for myself, when I was younger and I had to go pick out a book at a library, or to write a report on, I didn't know how to pick a book. And I used to pick them out by the cover. And it was like, that's horrible. They were dull and boring. And so I was one of those at the beginning that, oh my goodness, how am I going to read all these books? Because I don't like to read, because I never found that many good books. So this has everything picked out, and they are good. They are good, solid books. And sometimes there's one or two that I had a hard time. There was actually only one that I had a hard time with getting going. And I was like in chapter 6 of it. It was a read aloud. And I just said, I'm going to replace it with something else. But that was one out of all of the books. And it's been replaced since. So it must have been other people didn't find it that enjoyable either. But it's just one of those things that I would say 99.9% of the books here are so exciting and so engaging, and they're fun to read, and they're also fun to learn from. And sometimes they're not as much fun. And that's because we have to learn sometimes that emotion that might not be fun to dig into. And that, if you think about it, it might be the emotion that's holding you back rather than the book itself.
And I would add that our children feed off of our energy. So if I'm not into a book, and my kids can feel it, and then they start to complain, like, why are we reading this? Do we have to finish this? But if we can put aside our own agenda when reading through this curriculum, and knowing that in the end, there's never been a time where I didn't finish a book and I wasn't satisfied with the ending.
Right, exactly. It's you sometimes have to do the hard work to get through something, but you're right. It's same thing with just a normal school day. If it's off, if your kids are off, turn around and look at yourself, because it's usually mama that's causing the whole attitude change. And I know we've talked about that in the past, about how to do the reset and apologize to your children and get back on a positive track. So it is really driven by mom and dad and what the atmosphere of the home is.
And so let us just encourage you viewers that if you are stepping into this for the first time, whether it's homeschooling for the first time or looking at a literature-based approach for the first time, it is probably going to feel uncomfortable, just like anything new, especially if you haven't been reading aloud to your children since it was the little board books as babies. But there is definitely support for you, and there are ways to make it more enjoyable for you and then for more enjoyable for your children. So we just want to encourage you with that. Lynn, thank you so much for taking this time to just talk about what our philosophy is and hopefully give some parents who are on the fence or didn't know anything about it some more information so that they're able to make that decision with sound judgment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time.